when we talk about the things that we go through as human beings, the good, the bad, the ugly, we feel less alone because
Mhm.
I can't promise, but I want to say it's pretty much a guarantee that when you're vulnerable with the right people, when you put your thoughts out there, with the right groups of people that are willing to listen and hold space, they're going to be able to recognize that in themselves too. That, oh, my experience isn't crazy. My experience is valid. And I can get through it.
Welcome to the Kindness Is podcast presented by Kind Cotton, where we take a deep dive into the true meaning of kindness. I'm your host, co-founder of Kind Cotton, Kaitlin Johnstone. Let's dive in.
Wake up.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Kindness Is pod. It is no mistake that I am wearing my mental health tee today, and that is because I am talking to an incredible human and friend who has helped me through my journey with my own personal anxiety. Now, I say friend even though we have never met in real life, but that is the beauty and the power of social media. Margot Harris is a certified children's yoga and mindfulness educator and children's book author with a background in early education and literacy. Her goal is to empower children and their grown-ups to find inner peace, resilience, and joy through yoga. I cannot wait for you all to hear this conversation that we dive in today, talking about all things social emotional learning, the importance of mindfulness for kids, particularly starting them out at a young age, the dangers of school districts taking away SEL, and our own journey through our mental health and mental well-being. Margot, I am so excited you are here. Thank you so much. It's always good to be face to face. I'm hoping one day we can actually be face to face in real life. But for now, thank you so much for being here.
It is my pleasure. And I think I would die meeting you in person. I would just be such a fangirl, just wanting to hug you for probably an uncomfortable amount of time and then just probably cry because I'm a cancer baby and crying is just what I do. It's a pastime.
Awesome.
And it feels great. And it feels great to cry. I highly recommend it. But yeah, I would love to meet you in person at some point soon.
Yeah, me too. I know. I feel like that's slowly starting to happen more. So I'm just putting it out there that maybe in the next year or so that will happen. I would be very
Come up
excited.
to New York.
Right?
It's a book thing here. We can have an event. It'd be so fun.
Yeah, it definitely would. So for those listening who do not know you, can you tell everyone a little bit about your background and what inspired you to get into mindfulness and yoga for littles particularly?
Yeah. So my name is Margot Harris. I am a former early childhood educator. I was a teacher for just over a decade. But I always loved working with kids. And, when I decided I wanted to leave the classroom, it was because I was starting to feel a little bit caged in. And I started noticing that all I wanted to do while I was at work was teach yoga to the kids. And so what had happened is I had brought my adult practice and I made it kid friendly for my students. And that felt really natural and easy and fun. And a lot of folks were really drawn to it. Not just the kids, of course, the kids were so drawn to it. And I was like, I think I've tapped into something here the first time I had tried it, which was just a couple of years into teaching. And then with each year of my classroom educating career, I added more weeks, and then it was a weekly thing, and then it was every day, and so ultimately I decided, you know what, I'm gonna get fully certified and see if I can make this into a career, because when it came down to it, all I wanted to do was help the kids move their bodies, teach them how to breathe, to regulate their emotions. I wanted to offer them so many tools for coping with stress and anxiety, which even at 4 years old, I was noticing in them. And so I just said, it's time for me to explore doing my own thing. And what better thing to do than something I was so passionate about, something that I saw really benefited young people in early childhood in particular, because that's what I was teaching in. But then once I started teaching yoga and mindfulness full time in the school setting, and then in a variety of public wellness spaces and just public spaces like libraries and things like that, I just saw that, okay, this obviously isn't just great for 4-year-olds who've got a lot of energy in their body, but it's really great for teens. It's really great for, upper elementary, and oh my gosh, babies can do. And so, with the more work I did in the field with different age groups, I just felt more and more solidified in my choice that this was not my true calling, right? Working with young people, working with kids, but specifically trying to help them navigate life in a
Mm.
way that I don't know that every classroom educator, especially depending on where they are in the world or the country, can afford to dedicate the time and energy to, right? Because I know I'm preaching to the choir here, yourself as a former educator, knowing how much is asked of teachers, how much stuff is on their plates academically, right? In addition to so many things that they're asked to do. And so being able to sort of be the star of a show a little bit in a classroom or in a school for, once a week for the entire school year, or maybe just for a one-off assembly, right? I mean, just trying to find a way to reach more kids with this powerful practice that helps shape my own life, my own journey in mental health and physical health in so many valuable ways.
Yeah, I feel like it's so interesting that you mentioned you wanted to help young children move their bodies. And having been a kindergarten teacher and now having a daughter who's 4, I don't think the average public school setting is equipped to help children do that. And before anyone comes at me, I am the biggest proponent for protecting public education. I think there needs to be so many things done to pay teachers more, to support them further, to implement programs such as yours so that children are happy with themselves and content with their bodies and at peace so that they are engaged to learn. But I'll get off my soapbox a little bit. How have you found that that has been a challenge, particularly in the public school setting?
Yeah, I mean, well, you hit the nail on the head, right? I mean, when it comes to funding, that is usually the biggest barrier for most of the schools that I teach in. And so what I found is that it's about showing school communities, specifically through parents and caregivers and advocates and stuff like that, the value in what having an external program like my own or like anyone's, right? It doesn't have to just be yoga and mindfulness. There are so many incredible, people from that have companies dedicated to helping kids through a variety of modalities that aren't necessarily offered directly in the school system, to be able to come in during the school day once, twice, 100 times during the year, whether it be during the school day or after school or something, but have it be shown to the powers that be. That is usually the biggest barrier too, right? So if it isn't funding, it's about trying to nudge your way in through the door to even just show people what it is that you do or what it is that I do and how it can positively impact students, right? And not just the students, but their teachers. And then it's like kindness, right? It's like one thing, one good act is going to ripple out and has rippling effects amongst not just the students, but everyone that's around the students, right? And so, yeah, those are the biggest hurdles that I face trying to get myself into programs. But I do feel, generally speaking, over the course of the last 8+ years, that tides are shifting. There is more people talking about yoga and mindfulness for kids, talking about the value and the importance for kids to have brain breaks during the day, to have space to move their bodies, and being really intentional about it, because there's more research being done about it too, right? And so, like, all I feel like I can do is keep the conversation going in whatever spaces that I'm in, and then encourage the people that are the biggest advocates, which are typically the parents, PTA, right? Or caregivers, advocates for wellness, that are out there, and just reach out to those people, because those are the people that are really going to go to the admin and the superintendents and all those important powers that be and say, hey, we need this person. We need more of this in our lives, in our kids' lives. And so that's sort of been the biggest barrier, and also the biggest like light and sense of hope for me in my work for the last few years, is just seeing that, okay, once people do see the value, they try to find a way, right? If they found a way to fund, you know, a variety of things within the school system, they can find a way to help their kids with their social emotional learning, help their kids, their students with their wellness, right? Their physical and mental wellness. And there just sometimes isn't enough time throughout the day for, as I said before, educators to wear that 1800th hat, you know?
Yeah.
And obviously it's important that they have a practice themselves. It doesn't have to be yoga, although I'm an advocate for that, but like something that helps them nurture their own mental health, that helps them to provide themselves with self-compassion and self-care and self-love. So that way it can ripple out to their students, their school community. And so, yeah, that was my long-winded way of
No, I
answering you.
appreciate it. Why is it so important for even like the youngest of children
Mm,
to be mindful? Because I know for me growing up, I always danced and I had a dance teacher who was like very non-traditional, right? In the sense that she focused a lot on mindfulness and being present in the moment and paying attention to your body and the sensations that you are feeling while you're moving your body, right? And
mhm.
she didn't really even use the term mindfulness at the time because I don't think, I mean, I'm sure it was around, but it wasn't like in the forefront of conversation the way that it is today. And I think looking back on my childhood, that practice saved me. Like, I
Mhm.
can't even begin to tell you what that did for my mind and body and soul to have had her in my life and to have had that practice in my life. But I'm curious, since you are the expert, why is it so important to start children out so young to be in touch with their body?
Yeah. Well, I just want to say that's an amazing story. And I remember you sharing some of it when you were on Abby and Mine's podcast, which I know we're going to talk about in a bit. But I just got full body chills again listening to you share about it, because hearing stories like that, right, is just more, it's just more proof, it's more evidence that young people, whether they know it or not, need practices that are going to serve their mental and physical health, right? They
Mhm.
need introspection. They need to learn that sensations are more important than outer beauty, right? And so, like, I say that to you as a former dancer and myself as a former dancer. I didn't have that from my dance teachers growing up. It was straighten your leg, right? And I know you know, it's look
Mhm.
pretty, smile, make this kind of emotive face for this movement. And I learned how to make things look really good on the outside. And I never once considered how they felt to me on the inside. So
Mm.
that is just, I just, you know, again, I don't want to soapbox on that, but I love hearing that story about your former dance teacher, because in the 80s and 90s, which I know you grew up in as well, like myself,
Mhm.
that kind of stuff was not discussed. It was not talked about. And so, anyway, I'll jump off the soapbox for that for a moment. But why is it so important to start kids young? Early childhood is my jam, right? And so, I am just so passionate about bringing everything to this age group, because they are somewhat undervalued in terms of like the way they're thought of in the education system, right? In the way that in the way that funding is funneled or not to education. Early childhood educators are extremely undervalued and underfunded. Early learning centers are undervalued and underfunded, and it's heartbreaking and it's wrong. I say that with a smile so I don't start to get angry.
Yeah.
I can get very fiery about this topic, and I'm still very much an advocate for early learning centers and the extreme importance that reaching children, reaching young people in their most foundational years, right? Infancy through age 3 in particular. So many foundational things are provided for kids in this crucial part of their lives. And so little funding and time and attention is necessarily given, right, to infants, to toddlers, to, nursery age kids. And then, look, there's more emphasis on preschool in the last, couple of decades, and that is awesome. But it's not true everywhere, right? Like, it's true here in
Mm-mm.
New York. Maybe it's true where you live or where you used to teach. Here I feel that we have some luck in that, or we have enough people and the powers that be that understand the value and the importance of early childhood education. So why should kids start mindfulness in this age? Because it is when they're going to be the most sponge-like. It is when they're literally going to soak up so many of these important, invaluable life skills that mindfulness and yoga can offer to anyone at any age. But just imagine if we can reach them in those early months and years of their life when they are most likely to pick up everything, right?
Mhm.
And so what does it do, right? It fosters a sense of self-awareness, of curiosity, of compassion, right? Beginning from this super young age. And it also offers an incredible set of tools, just things for kids to do, to experiment with, to try, that will hopefully allow them to navigate the big and little challenges that they're going to be faced with throughout their childhoods, throughout their life. And be able to give them those tools from an early age so that way they can just keep developing them as they grow and keep practicing them as they grow. We call yoga, we call mindfulness a practice, right? Because it's a never-ending learning thing. But if we can start them when they're infants and toddlers and in their earliest of years, we are setting them up for more success and building more resilience and more ease for their complicated lives, And I know that that anxiety and depression are on the rise in kids as young as in their early childhood age, right? And kids, especially at that age, feed a lot off of energy. And so because their grown-ups are really, really stressed and overwhelmed and overworked and exhausted, they're naturally feeling all of that. And so just the earlier we can provide them with some of the tools that mindfulness and yoga can foster, the better off that they're going to be. And ultimately, the better off we're all going to be, because healthy kids are only going to grow into healthy adults. And then the generation can continue its magic after that.
What you just said hit me so hard. Before we got on this podcast, I was telling Margot how, like, today's just been crazy and this week has been crazy and I'm so stressed, and all of these external things that I couldn't really control feel as though they have happened this week.
Mm,
And I often look back on my childhood and think about how all of my fond memories from my childhood involve just being outside with my parents, right? Like,
mm,
playing silly
yeah.
games, running in fields, sliding down hills, riding my bike. Like, it sounds so cliche, but I find now that it's like, what can I get done while I'm playing with my daughter? I have to make it incredibly intentional that my
Mhm.
hours with my daughter are spent trying to be in those moments.
Right.
And it's really hard. It's like
Yes.
really hard in a society where we reward productivity the way we do.
Mm, yep.
Like, the more you put out, the more you do, the more you say, the more you consume. It's sorry,
Yeah.
we got off track a little bit with that, but that like
No,
really sunk in with me because it's
it's
something I
not
think
off
I
track.
deal with.
It's on track, right? Because all the things you described from your childhood memories were moments where you were fully embodied.
Mm,
And that's what we should want for kids, right? To offer them the experience of being fully in their body. And I often talk about toddlerhood in particular because I mean, it's my favorite age to teach. It's my favorite age to be around because it's such a grounding reminder of what things could be, right? Like, there's something about looking at the freedom that a toddler has. Sadly, it's one of the last times in a child's life when they are fully embodied, when they are fully free. And you see it as young as when they get into preschool and it's like, okay, everyone sit crisscross applesauce, right? That's a form of body control, truly.
Mhm.
And like, I understand. And as a former preschool teacher, I am mad guilty of that. I used to do that
Yeah.
all the time because partially it was because of space. It's because of safety, right? Because our brains as teachers have to be thinking about so many things. And then when I learned, right, and it's like we can only do what we can do with what we know when we know it. When I learned that that was me micromanaging these kids'
Yeah.
bodies who
Yeah.
maybe their hips don't like crisscross applesauce, right? And it's just like, okay, that is okay. Now I know. Now I'm going to do my best to do better, right? And so, like, and if you're telling your kid to sit crisscross applesauce, you're fine. Don't worry about it. I'm not trying to make anyone stressed out here, but it's just it's such a powerful time to give kids that autonomy and teach them that with respect to their body, with respect to their emotions, with respect to their mental health, that they can have some agency and control over it, right? That they can learn about themselves, what feels good, what doesn't, what they're okay with, what they're not. Can we look at it as an experiment, as an exploration, and offer it as a possibility without having it be forced upon them? Because that's the really important thing too about mindfulness and yoga is that you want kids or anyone really, but kids in particular, to buy into what you're doing by showing them what it can be for them and not telling them that, like, hey, if you do this relaxation exercise, you're going to calm down. Because then
Mm.
what will kids learn if they do that relaxation exercise and it amps them up or it stresses them out or it triggers them, right? They're going to learn, well, Miss Margot said it was relaxation and I don't feel relaxed. Well, that must mean there's something wrong with me, right? Which is the exact opposite of what might be true. And so, and there's no easy answer. There's, like you said before, there's just no easy answer. Life is complicated. Our practices are complicated. Even when we're trying to be as embodied as we can be with our kids, with our communities, with whoever, all the stuff we have to do is only going to be in the back of our minds because
Mhm.
of the world that we live in. And so just know that, like, the more that you can practice noticing that your mind is traveling to, I'm not really embodied with my daughter, or that is the practice. It's noticing when you're out of your body, when you're out of the moment, and being able to be aware of it and then bring it back, right?
Mhm.
And so just as a reminder to anyone listening, it's just like that moment of self reflection is your mindfulness practice. So if you can practice activating that sense of curiosity about your own thoughts, about what's happening, um, you're doing it. You're practicing mindfulness, right? You're
Yeah.
winning.
No, I love that reminder. I think that's really important for people to hear. It's like whenever I do yoga and they're like, if your thoughts are wandering, it's okay. And I'm like, no, it's not. But I need to remind myself that like I need to give myself that grace in those moments
Right.
because it's hard for sure.
It's hard.
Which I think is a beautiful segue into your journey of mental health. You have an amazing podcast, which I was so fortunate to be on, called Anxiety Warriors. And you talk a lot about your journey. So I'm hoping you can share a little bit about that with the listeners today.
Yeah, thank you. It's all intertwined, right? It's all enmeshed. You know, the briefest version I can tell you is that I grew up anxious, but I didn't know that I had anxiety until I had a full-blown panic attack, right? And that's so many people's reality is that all of a sudden they hit a wall, they have a full and complete physiological experience that they have no control over or no awareness of or no understanding of, and they don't know what to do with it. And so it was then, when I had this full mental and physical break, that I said, okay, that was different. Right. And then when I realized, oh, my experience is anxiety, I was able to look in the rear view and say, wow, I've been dealing with this for my entire life. And as I mentioned before, growing up in the time that we did in the 80s and 90s, nobody was talking about mental health. And for the decades prior, by the way, no one was talking about mental health. No one was talking about social emotional learning or being embodied or, ways to talk to yourself or tune into your thoughts. I mean, literally no one from my childhood. And so when I had the practice, right, of yoga, of mindfulness, which I started at around 18, and then it developed from there, and through my early years of teaching, and then becoming a yoga teacher for kids. And it's still very much like a learning curve, right? I'm still engaged with myself as if I'm a baby deer. And there's something lovely about that too. It's just like, if I can remember, like you said before, to give myself the grace, even for someone that teaches this stuff, you know? Um, and so my personal experience with mental health was that I always kind of felt a little weird. I felt alone in it. I felt like no one's talking about this. So that means that I need to keep it in. I shouldn't discuss it, right? And then as I started dipping my toe into sharing that part of myself with different people, right? I was seeing who responded to me in helpful or positive ways, or were able to elaborate on their own experience, and open up about it, right? And so in that, I felt less alone. I felt like I wasn't a weirdo, that this wasn't a terrible thing, that it was a human thing that I was experiencing. And so, you know, when I started the podcast with my dear friend and co-host Abby, which everyone go listen to Kaitlin's episode 75 of Anxiety Warriors podcast. You were such a fabulous guest.
Oh, thank you.
Honestly, one of my favorite episodes ever. You know, we had just decided during the pandemic that that moment in particular felt truly important for our own mental health, to be out there with our voices, however small they are, and whatever even small communities that we have, to share our stories, to share our truths, and to hold space for folks like yourself, like anyone who would be willing to come on our show and talk about their experience with not just anxiety, but a range of mental health issues and topics. We've had people talk about agoraphobia and OCD, depression, suicidal ideation. I mean, just the gamut. We're not doctors, we're not therapists, we don't pretend to be, you know, and so we just listen and we're honest with each other and hold the space. And so it's a passion project, and it's been a form of therapy for me. You know, I have my own practices that I have on a daily basis, on a weekly basis for my mental health. But talking outwardly and sharing my stories or what's going on with me lately and listening to other people share their truths, has been really empowering. And there was something about the phrase anxiety warrior that really landed for the two of us. And as yoga and mindfulness teachers, you know, warriors are a set of poses or asana in the practice of yoga. And we both shared that in those types of movements, we feel brave and confident and powerful and empowered. And so that's sort of the hope, is that we can remind people that we can be anxious but strong, right? We can be dealing with a lot, but also know that we can have the capability of moving through it with grace.
I feel like it really grounds us in our humanity towards one another too, right? Like it really centers me when I can hold space for another human being who may be going through something that I can understand, or something that I can't understand, but something that I can empathize with. And I didn't talk about mental health at all until I was a grown adult and started Kind Cotton, which was just 7 years ago. And I
Right.
had a lot of stuff, right? Like a lot of mental illness with my dad, definitely had anxiety my entire life, but didn't have the words or the resources to understand that that is what was going on with me, not some sort of unknown physical ailment that was never
Right.
diagnosed, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, you're getting rushed to the emergency room on Christmas Eve because you have such bad heartburn and like racing heart, but nothing is wrong with you. Go home, it's fine. You
Just go
probably
home.
just need a Tums, you know?
Just sleep it
Um,
up.
yeah. So I think there is so much value for showing up and sharing your story and seeing one another. And I appreciate that you do that on such an important level, right? Like you talk about these things all of the time. And I just want you to know that it's appreciated and that you are seen. And if anyone is listening to this, please go follow their podcast. It's amazing. You also have I love this because me having Kind Cotton, I feel like there are just so many things that have been intertwined into what I am passionate about. And you are
Mhm.
very similar, right?
Yeah, no, totally.
It's so wild to me. But you have this amazing yoga practice and you go into schools and teach kids, and you have this podcast, and you are also a children's book author. So, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So my children's book, Cookie Doga, a book about yoga, mindfulness, and cookies, which are my three favorite things, was my pandemic baby. When I wasn't allowed to teach in schools, like most people that were independent contractors or small businesses that were going into those types of settings, everything kind of halted. Even after, life kind of opened back up with masks and stuff, some of my former contracts were just gone. They just didn't have the funding, or they were utilizing the space that I would teach in for extra space for their students to separate from one another, which of course I understood and respected. And so I had always had that deep internal flame of I wanted to write a book. As since I was a child myself, I've been obsessed with books, children's books, fiction, nonfiction, all the things. And reading was such an imperative part of my growing up. And then as a teacher, I would spend every week, I was in the library every Saturday buying new books for my next week's theme with my preschoolers. And I found so many interesting ways to incorporate them into my work. And then when I left the classroom to become a yoga and mindfulness teacher, the same thing was true. The big thing, though, was that I felt like I was uniquely able to take any book and find ways to bring in breath work, bring in movement, bring in focusing activities, right? Because as teachers, we're just built for that. But I couldn't find a lot of kids' yoga books. And so when I started looking into it, I realized this was a really tiny niche. And so I loved that idea. Kids yoga is a niche. It's a growing one, and I'm so glad to see it. But it is still a niche, right? And so it was like, can I be a voice in this space? Not everyone may be able to go to a yoga studio or get yoga in their school, or at their library or wherever. Maybe they don't even know about the practice, right? But if they're able to find books that are fun, that are pretty, that are cute and rhyming, or whatever, all the things that attract me to a lot of children's books, specifically for the age group that my book is tailored for, that they could have that as a tangible resource, right?
Mhm.
You could be a parent, an educator, someone who's never practiced yoga, and pick up a book like mine and hopefully be able to try it out, right? In a fun and playful way that's going to help kids to engage with these practices. While to them, it might seem like they're just pausing for 3 breaths while they stand still for a moment, right? What we know is that pausing for 3 breaths is really challenging for any age, but for children especially. And so what we're doing is we're offering them a skill, we're offering them a tool, right? Maybe they're just in triangle pose and they think it's fun and bendy and, silly, and they see a cute picture. But we know that that's offering them so many different benefits in their physical body, and it's giving them a little bit of an energy boost, right? Or at least, those are some of the scientific things that some of those poses or things that we do could potentially offer to kids or for anyone.
And it has a really good cookie recipe in the back. So shout out to that,
Yeah.
because Kenzie and I have
Right?
made Margot's cookies probably 10 times already.
Oh my gosh,
So
really?
yeah, we make them for every holiday. So
Oh my
anytime
gosh.
and I was just telling Margot, I know the recipe by heart now, so I never have to look at the book, and I can't find my book. So I need another copy of the book because it's really awesome. And it's
Thank
so
you.
fun. Like in the beginning, we would always take out the book, read the book first, and then we would go back to the recipe. And that's when, the real fun happened for Kenzie, my daughter,
Yeah,
because she is like you and obsessed with cookies. But yeah, we make them for
best.
any sort of holiday we could think of: Valentine's Day, Christmas,
Mm,
St. Patty's Day. And it's just kind of like our thing. So,
that makes my heart so warm.
so
Yes.
where can people follow, support you, grab a copy of the book, listen to the
Yeah.
podcast? Tell us all of the things.
So you can find me on my website, which is calmcookie.org. You can join my Instagram family. We have lots of silly fun over there. It's at calmcookie_kids yoga. The podcast about anxiety is called Anxiety Warriors Podcast, and you can find our IG just like that. It's available Apple Music, Amazon Music, Spotify, or pretty much wherever you can get your podcasts. I'm sure wherever you're listening to this right now, you can look up Anxiety Warriors Podcast and find it. And I'm actually also the co-owner of a brand new kids yoga studio where I live on Long Island in Bayshore. And so if you are local to Long Island, or if you're visiting New York and you are interested in coming to take classes or workshops for your kiddos, babies through teens, it's called Ground and Center. And that Instagram is Ground and Center LI.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Before we go, can you please share with everyone, which I think it has been woven throughout very beautifully already, but if you had to pinpoint what kindness is and looks like to you, what is it?
Well, obviously I knew this question was coming. And so I spent tons of time as an anxiety warrior overthinking it, because that's what we do, just overthink all the things. But I think the one thing that kept coming back to me when I thought about this question is hearing people's truths, witnessing people. Mindful, active listening, and I also wanted to share that as an accountability moment for myself, because this is something that I need to work on more, that I'm working on more myself. I can be really impulsive, I have adult ADHD, and I'm sure many of us do. And so I find it sometimes really challenging to wait my turn to speak, or to, I hear someone say something fun or interesting and I'm ready to just dive on it. And it's just like, that's not necessarily unkind, but true kindness is when we're able, for me, it's when I'm able to really pause and hear and listen to someone's truth, even if it's something I don't want to hear or that makes me uncomfortable.
And I need that message too. Like even throughout the podcast, it's been a beautiful way to practice that, because sometimes when you're talking, I'm like, yes, like this is so good. And I want you to know how good I find it. But then I'm like, okay, Kaitlin, take a deep breath and listen wholeheartedly to what they have to say. And I think it's just such a beautiful reminder. I appreciate you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing this space with us. Thank you for all of your knowledge and everything that you do.
Thank you so much. I'm obsessed with Kind Cotton, watching you grow this company and all the incredible things that you're doing, and with your new book and this podcast is just so inspiring to me. And I look forward to seeing you and what's going on with the company every day on Instagram. So thank you for creating this space and holding it for me today. And love you.
You do. Thank you all so much for listening to this episode of the Kindness Is podcast. If you love it and it's adding even a little bit of value to your life, we would love, love, love if you could subscribe, rate, and review so we can reach even more people and make this world a little bit more kind.